Hello and welcome to the first ever live Academy podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to bring to you my good friend and mentor, and we did say hero yesterday, but after his actions today we'll judge if he is actually my hero. Gavin back again, the original OG member of the podcast, where we actually had our first podcast on stuff like this.
Definitely, on chairs.
Unbelievable. How are you getting on?
Good, really good. We're just finished filming paper 1 and paper 2 Easter courses here, so I'm delighted. Nice few days off now.
We can nab you away from the lads.
Absolutely. So so great, all good. Bizarre times, exceptional times, and we're just kind of dealing with it as best we can.
Yeah.
So
we are
social distancing.
Yeah, we are.
No,
unbelievable, mate. So great to have you in. Well, and we're going to put you a little bit on the spot with a few questions. We've got a few questions from a few peeps.
Brilliant.
And but before I ask you those direct questions, I personally have a few questions. First of all, what do you think about it all? What do you reckon? I don't know about but just in terms of school. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it's definitely, we have to look, I think, for the positives and look for the silver lining in all of this, and I think it's afforded brand new opportunities for all of us in terms of engaging with our teaching in different ways, and I'm for one, I'm enjoying the video process. I get kind of the same response from an empty classroom with just one videographer than I would from 100 students in terms of the jokes that I make, so it's the same kind of reaction. But no, look, it's very difficult. It's very trying times. We just have to make the best of a bad situation, and we need to try and utilise what's out there at the minute, because there's a lot of really, really good sources, mainly coming from ourselves, to be egotistical at the minute. But there's a lot of really good videos that are now up on YouTube, and again, we have obviously the courses coming up and stuff. But so it's very different. I definitely miss students. That's what I would say. I miss seeing the students face to face, having the chats with him. Everywhere with them and kind of vibing off them, so that is the one thing that we miss massively. So it's very alien just to have a camera and just talk to no one, and that's obviously the worst part of it all. So but we do think that hopefully the little videos and these kind of little things, these little interactions, hopefully they do help and kind of alleviate a little bit of that kind of pressure and fear that some students may be feeling. So don't worry is the short answer. As in, again, we're all in the same boat. I know some people were kind of giving out about the orals and things like that, but we're all in the same boat. It's effectively about us all kind of pulling together now, and and if and when the Leaving Cert happens in June, we'll just manage that to the best of our ability. And in a bizarre sense, we've been given all this extra time that we can kind of engage in relative study ourselves in terms of working on what we effectively need to work on over the next little while. So there's definitely that as well. So
my delts.
Don't be ridiculous.
What else?
Exactly.
Listen, I'm finding it personally quite tough. It's in obviously there's loads of things going on, but it's just the little things. I'm dying for a haircut so badly, and I know there's people in a way worse situation, but I love to be able to. The people, obviously, there's way worse ideas and there's way bigger stressors that people have, and so I love the whole fact of trying to help as many students as possible to try, as you said, alleviate any of those stressors and kind of get them to see it for exactly what it is, and how I can, with my, I suppose, limited maturity, but my 30-year-old maturity, pop it into their head that they know that this will pass too. Exactly. Everyone's in the same sort of boat. Exactly. So how can we help each other? So how can you help your mates? How can I help my mates? How can you? And there's so many really innovative things coming from it. And I really enjoyed I actually really enjoy doing the videos, because it's definitely made me ask myself, right, am I explaining things as best as possible? Because maybe in a class you kind of think you are, because you're having a general conversation, but am I enunciating? Am I focusing on the right points? Am I it's kind of it makes you kind of cut the crap out of your teaching. And it's I really enjoyed having to massively go through, dissect the entire course again and say, right, how can I go about giving this to someone who has never, maybe has never seen anything. And I actually only realised, because obviously we were in the school, when I'm getting the questions on the Instagram, which I love, by the way, but there's so many people, I told a specific student to focus on this unit, and they didn't know what was in the unit. And that's not a problem. Obviously I'll help them out with any of it, but you realise how this sort of stuff like this, when it gets it actually genuinely does help people, and it just alleviates the stress more so that it's not the most important thing in the world.
No, of course.
But you know, if you're a student, you're 17 or 18, I can attest to this. If it's just another straw on the camel's back, and it's not ideal, but it can. Hopefully we're going to today flip it into some more advantages. Yeah,
defo, and I think the main thing is to have a little look at these questions as you were talking about there, and see where people, because invariably, like, it's the same questions that crop up over and over again. But to take your point about just cutting out all the kind of nonsense and really just delivering, you know, decent content, it's amazing how much, I suppose, extra you get in to, like, we're filming obviously 75-minute videos, but the 75-minute video versus a 75-minute class, having that opportunity for students to kind of pause, listen, you know, re-watch, re-listen to the information really does tend to slow things down. And as you said, it cuts out a huge amount. We're effectively getting kind of almost 2 75-minute classes into one 75-minute video. So I know, not to talk about Easter too much because we're not, but again, the volume of content that's going to go out there is gargantuan. Like, it's massive. So yeah, defo.
Gargantuan.
Big.
Yeah.
Huge.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so
if I'm so I know for maths, if I'm a student sitting at home, which I am because I'm not a student and I'm currently not at home, but if I was, and you were just thinking about, say, in general, like say the Leaving Cert in general, what advice would you as a teacher give like, doesn't have to be in English, to a student that I've just got feedback from students, they're talking about, well, first of all, we said a little bit of anxiety, motivation too. Motivation levels are dropping because they don't have someone on them the whole time. I have my own opinions on this, but I'm not going to enter it. What would you say over the next number of weeks or whatever it is?
Look, I know you have your own opinions on that, and I would say your opinions are coloured slightly by, you mentioned it a second ago, that you're a 30-year-old individual, so your opinions then are coloured by that emotional maturity and being a man that kind of lives with structure and good, clear structure. So that's why your opinion is coloured that way. Like, it's natural that there's going to be those levels of anxiety, that kind of fear and trepidation, because there's that element of the unknown. What happens next? If we talk about specifically the exams, we don't ultimately know what's going to happen. All we can do is control the controllables. All we can do is prepare for what we personally can look after. And in terms of alleviating anxiety and kind of pressure and stuff like that, I will go back to that word a second ago. And again, you can see it on the Instagram questions there. Like, even for English, like when we've said that, look, Gavin's going to field some questions, a lot of the questions are, how can I stay motivated, or how can I get motivated? And the best thing would be to have a little bit of structure. Put some structure on your day. It's very easy to kind of sleep in late now, again, when you don't have anywhere to be. As you said there, you've no one on your back kind of saying you have to be in school 9 a.m. ready to go. So I would implement your own little structure, and that's of course going to be relative for individuals. That's going to be relative for everyone in terms of what you can manage throughout the day, in terms of how much responsibility you have, in terms of your home life as well. But just try and give yourself, whatever it is, a set amount of hours a day to try and tick off and say, listen, I'm going to do that for study. And again, it's something that I've often said to you before. When I was a Leaving Cert student, I simply did not know how to revise properly. I did not know how to structure my day properly. I'd launch into chapter 1, the beginning of the biology book, every single time, and that just simply doesn't work. So what I would do is put a little bit of structure in your day. Say at some stage, right, I'm going to give myself 30 minutes for the unseen poem. I'm going to take a past paper question. I'm going to look at the questions, look at the poem, and do my best to put pen to paper on that. Or I'm going to give myself slightly longer today. I'm going to give myself an hour on a Hamlet question. I'm going to put the question at the top of the page. I'm going to think about the language of the question, what specific terminology is in there, how would I plan this out, and maybe even just jotting down maybe 1 or 2 of the points that you would likely to use. So 1 or 2 of the points is going to be about an A4 page and a half to 2 A4 pages, and that's 2 A4 pages of a 5.5 A4 page essay. You know, that you're not doing the full things, but you are chipping away at it, and you're getting proper pragmatic revision done, proper exercises completed, because otherwise the day just gets away from you. You know what I mean? You sit at home, you go on the PlayStation for multiple hours, or you just go out the back garden, you're kicking a ball around, or whatever it is people are doing, scrolling through Instagram, whatever. The day gets away from you. So put some structure on the day and take on specific tasks. If you want to go through it, you know, systemically, start at paper 1, start looking at the question A questions, how to go about that, go back over your notes, etc., and you know, periodically go through both paper 1 and paper 2. But it's all about structure. That's what I would say.
All right. I suppose could we get to we do some of the English questions then?
Yeah, definitely.
People have sent in. So thank you very much for the questions, both on my Instagram and on the Dublin Academy Instagram as well. it allows us, when you guys ask us questions, we love getting the questions because it allows us to dictate where our content is going. Again, we're looking at it from our point of view. We prefer to do it from a student's point of view, so you can help us help you by always asking us questions. Myself and Gavin like to talk about it like outside our subjects, but also obviously Gavin is like an unbelievable English teacher, and I've taught one or two subjects, and I'm all right the odd time. But these questions here anyway, if we chirp into them here. So basically, there's a good few questions on this where it asks about the comparative structure. Before you launch into this here, I would also say that you've done some really, really, really good content already on this in terms of the couple of podcasts we've done previously on the comparative structure. But I suppose if we're looking at this comparative structure now, for anyone that's watching it live, they're sitting at home, they want it right to the point. What are we talking about for a comparative structure? Can you tell us?
Definitely. I might use a little bit of board now in a second, but in terms of, I think the point worth making is there, again, as you said about the podcast and the previous material that has come up before, it's not a bad thing to maybe go and kind of rewatch or re-listen to those podcasts that are there on YouTube, because again, it goes through a hell of a lot, not just comparative structure, but actually if you look at some of the questions that have been asked, again, there's a hell of a lot of answers within those videos as well. So even one or two of the questions was asking about kind of the unseen poetry, how to get 5% of our grade. There's a full dissection on YouTube there, which again is readily available.
Can I interject as well? And with the fact that we have it on the school podcast too, is it actually takes advantage of what's termed, I suppose, dead time. So time when you're travelling, if you are travelling, or time when you're going for a walk, or time when you're just lying in your bed but you don't want to open up your eyes, you just want to chill, versus but you're still getting some productive work done, you're learning about things. And as you said, if you're starting to get systematic with that word tasks, you know, something that I've actually done, because I used to find that I'd get to the end of the month and I'd be saying, what the hell did I even do? What's going on? And then I started saying, looking back and realizing, actually I've done a hell of a lot of stuff, and it's just in your brain. So if you, what I actually started to do, I robbed this from Andrew Conway, is I started writing stuff on post-it notes and putting it in a jar. And basically I would look back in the jar, and there's only incredible things that come into that jar, and when I feel a bit bad or a bit like shit, I look at that and go, actually shit, I've done a lot of stuff here this month there, or it's actually for the year I did it, so big things. But if you were thinking of the next few weeks, there are going to be times where you get in your head and the emotional load goes down, but you can just add something else to your jar. Maybe you're tired, maybe you don't want to write loads of stuff out, you listen to one of those podcasts, you do something extra with that dead time.
It's that passive learning. Like this actually is kind of, it's in the middle between passive and active. Depends on how hard you want to work here. If you want to take down the little pointers, if you've never seen me as a teacher before and this is all brand new to you, well then you can be as active as you want. But in reality, this is kind of passive learning, that you're kind of just listening and you're kind of taking on board. And if anything, it's just reaffirming all the good stuff you already know. So as you said, there's definitely times to be very active, sitting down, putting pen to paper, going back over the notes, and then there's other times to be a little bit more passive and just kind of almost learning just by association, so to speak.
Fantastic. So comparative.
In terms of the comparative, just to clarify, so the comparative being part of paper 2, okay, you'll have 3 texts. Because we're all looking at 3 different texts, we're just going to simply call them text A, text B and text C for the minute. You will have a film, a novel and a play. Hopefully you have those 3 there. I'm just looking at the phone there just to make sure that I'm in shot. So you'll have a film, a novel and a play. Some schools will have maybe 2 novels and a play, or 2 novels and a film. At this stage, let's not get bogged down in it, but what we like to see is the 3 different mediums, you know, that we are comparing different styles. So film, novel and play tends to work really, really well. It's 70 marks, guys, and you can see here I have 70 minutes, put a little star beside that. As a general rule of thumb, this is a nice little takeaway point, it's about a minute per mark in terms of paper 2. You look at Hamlet, for example, 60 minutes for 60 marks. You look at our study poetry, 50 minutes, 50 marks, alright? Again, our comparative 17.5%, massively weighted topic, second only to our essay on paper 1, alright? So again, it warrants a huge amount of attention. I spent 2 full classes in the Easter revision courses going through this because of how important it is. There are 2 types of question, Dave. So there's a 30 and 40 mark question, or there's a 70 mark question. It's important that students recognise at home there is no prejudice from a marking standpoint. Again, whether you go with 30 or 40 or whether you go with the 70, it really doesn't matter in terms of marking. If you go with the 30, you'll be asked to look at one text by itself, and then in the 40 you'll be expected to compare and contrast the other 2 texts. if you go with 70, you'll be expected to compare and contrast all three texts together. The plus and minus here, guys, it's very much an overview in our structure. Plus stands for similarities, minus stands for differences. The overarching thing that we're looking to do within this is to find similarities and differences within our comparative essay, within our comparative texts, all right? The more linking language, it's something that I encourage my students to use the entire time. We'll say linking L there, so I don't want to go over too close to Dave in terms of social distancing, obviously.
It's all right, hey?
Very important we use a hell of a lot of linking language, and it's very important that we use a huge amount of key moments. Key moments, guys, should be what frames our answer. You should use a key moment or key moments per text, per point that you make, of which you'll make 3 or 4 arguments, 3 or 4 points within your answer, okay? What that typically might look like is, if you have our A plus B and C there, if you have 1 point in terms of, say it's a cultural context question, and you're looking at how much the setting, how much the actual location impacts upon our characters, well, you might look at a key moment from your play, or text A as we describe it, okay? And we look at that key moment. That might be at the very beginning of the text, and that's either similar to or completely different to a key moment that you looked at within your novel. Alright, and then again, this is either similar to or completely different to a key moment which you looked at in your film. Alright, text C there. And effectively that will be one part of your comparative essay. You'll try to repeat this 3 or 4 times. Each one of those points, guys, will probably be around 1.5 to 1 3/4 of an A4 page. Again, your line breaks, your paragraphs can come in wherever you want there. You can have 1, 2 or 3. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is the plus and minuses that you are linking constantly, comparing and contrasting. Everything I've just gone through there in terms of a 70-mark essay, this is a relatively new structure. It's only been delivered to us as teachers since in around 2015, I think it was, 2016. So it's a relatively new structure. It allows for you guys as candidates to open up your answer a little bit, go through the key moments in a little bit of a greater fashion. Alright, so that's, I suppose, Dave, very much a brief overview in terms of our comparative structure, the difference between a 30 and 40 mark and a 70 mark. It's very important that we're linking language and using those key moments to link our text together.
When I was a new junior cert science course. When I was learning, you go to the open days and they tell you about what's on the course and how to teach it and what's coming in and what's different. I very much found that the engagement level of teachers that have been teaching for a long period of time, I know this. I think, this is stupid. And they kept. I noticed that they kept teaching the old course. They kept teaching the old course, which is genuinely better science. In my personal, way better science. So for teaching the kids science, that was unreal. But for applying it towards exams, it was terrible, because they were looking at questions then the junior cert that I'd never seen, and that was terrible. And even like in the new junior cert science course, there's Earth and Space. Would that be kind of similar to what you're saying with this? Because we get a lot of students coming in saying, "Oh, my teacher's very, very good," but like, how do I apply it to the Leaving Cert game? How do I apply it to go ahead and get points to the full idea of the paper? Like, they're probably brilliant at dissecting plays, they're probably brilliant at this, but you're saying this came in 2015, 2016.
Yeah, it's relatively new. So if you talk about playing the game a little bit, the Leaving Cert game, how do I get most amount of points? Is that you recognise now that we're looking for that extra little bit of development in each point that we make. Gone are the days of having to link all 3 texts within the 1 paragraph. In fact, we're not actually looking for that anymore. We're looking for all 3 texts to be linked within the same point. Yes, as I said here, setting, for example, in terms of cultural context. But that might be 3 paragraphs, as I said. That might be an A4 page and a half, because you're constantly making these links and comparisons. You're developing it a little bit stronger, and you're going through key moments. It's a little proviso I have in my notes. It's a little bit of a warning to say that there are all these different varying types of structure that exist for the comparative. And again, you can get marks by going through them in different ways, but what you want to do is, as we said here, play the game a little bit, make your answer as accessible and as appealing to the examiner as possible, and that's one way to go about it. Having nice, clear.
If they're going through it, they're kind of saying, "All right, and they're rewarding you marks.
Yeah.
This is the scoring system. It's like if you play, I don't know, soccer or rugby, you win by getting scores.
Absolutely.
Not by being like potentially the best at catching or the best at whatever.
Like, say for example, you've dealt with
students have to have to realise that. I
Yeah,
feel.
no, definitely, and it's largely down to formula. You're absolutely right. It's largely down to formula, understanding how to, like, the parameters, so to speak. You know, the lanes in the bowling alley.
Yeah.
Like, hypothetically, with that in
lanes?
mind, yeah, of course.
You use
I want
the
to
sides.
get the highest score. Like,
Yeah.
When you've dealt with that key moment, right, and you've had a line break, and you're now starting a new paragraph, well, that you launch in with that linking language. You say, this is incredibly similar to, you know, the beginning of our play, or in A Doll's House, Nora acts in much the same way as character X. Like, all that language, in terms of optics, it's something I talk about constantly in my grinds. How can I make my paper look as good as possible? And the optics are very, very easy to implement, or positive optics, very easy to implement in this type of question.
Fantastic.
Comparative. It's a snapshot, of course it is. That's something worth mentioning to everybody who is watching at home. All 100 of us, 85, 86 of us that are watching currently at the minute, that it's very important that you understand that's just a snapshot. It's a very much a microcosm of the overarching kind of angle that we take. That's one part, as I said, of potentially 3 or 4 that you might use within the comparative.
Unseen poetry.
Yeah, personal favourite of mine.
Max Marks.
Max Marks in unseen poetry. Let's get rid of this real quick.
My good old mate, Max Marks.
Max Marks, top bloke.
Yeah. His poetry's in Braille.
Unseen poetry, very quickly on this. Unseen poetry is 20 marks of paper 2. It is 5% of our grade. If we stick to the whole angle that I said, minutes per mark, we have 20 to 25 minutes. We're branching that out a little bit there because 20 minutes is simply not enough to do anything. 20 to 25 minutes.
You can do a good home workout in 20 minutes.
Well, there's that, like, yeah. 20 to 25 minutes on our unseen poetry. We are going to do this last. This is the last thing that we should engage with our English Leaving Cert. You're going to try and write within those 25 minutes in and around 2 A4 pages, and it is all about style. It is all about our pattern, imagery, sensuousness, and suggestiveness. All right, we can go one step further. We can kind of predict our questions. Even for unseen poetry, we can kind of predict our questions. The paper typically looks like 1A and 1B. 1A tends to be a thematic question, as in what is the message that the poet is trying to get across. 1B tends to be about imagery. They're each 10 marks. Or a question 2, which is a pure style-based question, and that'll ask us about aesthetic language, one of our 5 categories of language. If you don't know your 5 categories of language, again, that's not something we'll go through today, but again, it's about aesthetic language. Aesthetic language is designed to evoke a response in the reader. It's designed to be sensuous, you know, again, a huge amount of comparisons so that we can relate to the material. Alright, that is a type of question. That's the full 20 mark question, 2 A4 pages there. I encourage my students to go for that a lot because, again, remember, you have about 4 to 5 minutes to dissect not only questions and poem within this section. So we understand that you're not going to get every facet, every piece of minutiae from it. All you can do is get your best, do your best and get as much information as you can. So a nice sense of humility in your response here. You know, little phrases like, well, in my interpretation, or in terms of my initial reading on this poem, those type of lines work really, really well, okay? So again, we're trying to identify as much as we can. That's why the question 2 tends to work a style-based question, because you focus on your aesthetic techniques. Things like similes, metaphors, anthropomorphism, pathetic fallacy, those kind of things, if they exist. Focus on your title. Ask the title within our title as well, guys. Ask yourself, what are the connotations? The title becomes an excellent reference point to use, because if the title tells us a hell of a lot of information, great, and if it doesn't, even better, because we can say that and say that there's a good strong juxtaposition between the two as well.
Yeah, perfect. Sorry.
Still okay?
Still okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're still going live?
Yeah. I think we'll stop there for a second.
Alright, no worries.
Can I keep running or?
Yeah, no, you keep running on. You keep running. So,
Sweet.
Unseen poetry. Again, this is part of our podcast, wasn't it?
It is part of the podcast, and as I said, there's a video up on YouTube as well there that we can have a little look at and we kind of dissect.
How much is it to listen to that podcast again?
It's free, man. Free content. It's all there.
Unbelievable.
We've recorded it. It's all ready to go. Like, again, I know, like, one of the potential questions we'll look at is like poetry predictions, and obviously poetry predictions we will reserve a little bit for kind of Easter courses and stuff. We might talk about maybe 1 or 2 poets that you should be looking at. But yeah, last season, so to speak, last Leaving Cert season, we managed to get kind of the 4 out of the 4, and again, we're as optimistic certainly this year as well. So yeah, That's a little bit on unseen. Obviously, we know we paused there for a second, but again, as we were saying, 2 A4 pages. Ask yourself what is the connotations with that exercise. Ask yourself, how positive and how strong am I with my aesthetic language techniques?
Unbelievable. So I know you're gonna have the predictor now. In the future, obviously, they call him Gavin the Poetry Predictor Cowser. That's your middle name. But what I'd like to ask, just on that holistic, because predictions are great, but like for example, I make predictions in the Leaving Cert biology experiments, and it's so handy, so easy to make these predictions. I say of the 23, study these. That's fine, but actually having a general overall knowledge of the experiments, it actually helps you in section C.
Of course,
and like it helps you in the whole course. So like I am actually. Students ask me what are the predictions for experiments, and I can tell them some of them, but I just know it's just the particularly lads are only going to focus on them. They're going to leave everything else out, and they're going to forgo 5% and a general understanding. So that's why I've developed that workbook for everyone to go through. So I don't want instead of actually getting all them out of you now, but how many poets say me right now, because I don't want to gamble. I want to do very well here, Gavin. How many poets should I prepare?
Right, if we're not gambling and we want to prepare very, very well, we can still kind of flirt with that line a little bit and work smarter, not harder. If you have 5 poets in the bag, you are guaranteed to see one of them on the course, on the paper in June.
And you have to use one?
You just use one.
Okay.
So there'll be 4 on the paper in June, and you tackle one of those questions. A lot of the time people ask about some poets will have harder questions attached or easier questions attached. If Paul Durkin comes up, for example, will it be an easy question? There should really be no easy or hard questions, because something we focus on here is point by point structure, and we come up with 3 or 4 areas of focus that the poets like to talk about, and then what we do is we use them for basically all of our essays. Some are going to be far more dominant than others depending on the LOQ, depending on the language of the question, but our areas of focus don't tend to change. Like, say for example, if you're looking at Paul Durkin as a poet, you know that Ireland 2002 and Wife Who Smashed Television Gets Jail are both poems about social commentary. They're both poems about fear and anxiety about the Americanization of Ireland. You know that Nessa and En Famille, or The Difficulty That Is Marriage, for example, you know that they are very much about the relationship with his wife, the relationship, and then obviously the subsequent divorce. And you know poems like Madman and Sport are very much polemical attacks against his father. So you know that those are the areas of focus for and attached to Durkin. They don't tend to change. So whatever the LOQ is, whatever the specific language of the question, whatever the 2 parts to that question are, you're going to bring in that subject matter, and then you're going to talk about how, stylistically speaking, he puts that across. So stylistically speaking, you'll talk about the fact that he uses economy of language, the fact that his poems are incredibly unconventional, that we have those couplets at play, the fact that he's an incredibly narrative poet. He gives us these vignettes, these little snapshots from his life. So that's the kind of organic, I suppose, place that you need to be in terms of response to a poet. You need to know the areas of focus, and as Dave was asking there, that negates the need for predictions, so to speak. Just have your 5. A lot of people will have 4 anyway. It won't take too much longer to get a 5th one under your belt.
So hopefully that answers your question, Luke Cano. There's a very good question here, Gavin, which is not it's a bit. It says it's from Louise Blair. She said, "Do you think reading has a big impact on students' grades? And what are your favourite books?"
Great, that's a good question. Do I think reading has a good impact on students' grade? Maybe in terms of formative years. I think if you are a good reader when you are younger, potentially, you've more experience of a wider array of vocab and language and things like that. Indubitably, yes. Very nice, and that would be an ecumenical matter. So maybe in the formative years, Dave, right now, I would rather look at our notes, look at synonyms of maybe potentially overused words that you're looking at, things like that. That's what I would potentially do instead.
Things kind of, so overused words, you mean because you want to separate yourself?
Yeah.
That's simply, so any student, I think that just one of the other questions here that I just wanted to address, sorry to cut across, is they talk about, but other years wouldn't have had this in their Leaving Cert. Well, first, as we know, we can turn this into an extreme positive with all the online content, all the time at home. You effectively have your whole day to yourself. You don't have to do your day job anymore. You don't have to go to school for a while. And then they kind of say, but if this takes away, but it affects everybody. And essentially, the Leaving Cert is in between,
Sorry, I'm listening.
Bloody listen to this.
I am. The Leaving Cert one, that we're turning it into a positive, sorry.
Is effectively like it's a comparison between people to get points to move on to college.
Absolutely.
No job ever goes to you. What do you get in your Leaving Cert? They ask about college, how do you get into college, points, what gets the points, simply as we saw on our CAO podcast, supply and demand.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's going to be judged on the same metric.
Mm-hmm.
So it is still a fair comparison. You're not getting compared to your older brother from 5 years ago or
definitely.
whatever.
But that's the whole thing, as in about I know this is all stemmed from reading and different books and things like that. But
I've read 33 this year.
Yeah.
Well, look, what good's it done for me? I've no haircut of the same t-shirt.
I just think you're right. You're up against yourself here. You know what I mean? You can talk about the bell curve and things like that, but if you produce an absolute otherworldly essay, it'll blow the bell curve right out of the park. It doesn't matter.
It's a
non-starter. So all you can do is focus on yourself. Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins is one of my favourite books pretty recently. I'm reading The Outsider at the minute by Stephen King. Those are a couple of books that I'm looking at, but as I said, that probably doesn't apply to a lot of us out there. You need to be going back over your studied material, I would say. Any other questions?
Yeah, can I ask one of the live? There's a few live questions here coming in.
Yeah.
Someone said, any tips on how to learn Hamlet quotes?
Yeah, so and this sounds like a plug massively as well for the school, but we basically have I will talk about what we have here, and then I will talk about it in a generic sense. We basically have a full handout as part of the Easter course here. It's called Hamlet Additional Notes, and literally all it is quotes, turns of phrases, the important soliloquies that exist within Hamlet. And that's potentially one area to focus on. But what I would say is also remembering, and this actually might lead on to Dave, one particular thing we can talk about with regards to Hamlet, is that you should be looking at around 30 quotes from Hamlet, alright? 30 quotes, and what we look at with regards to Hamlet is we look at the concept of those quotes being what's called malleable. Alright, and malleable effectively means interchangeable, means useful, alright? Because one of the other questions that came in on Instagram was how do I prepare for Hamlet, or what should I be looking at? If you recognise that there are only 4 types of question that can come up on Hamlet, alright? There's only really 4 types of things that they can ask you. They can't ask you to look at, Hamlet treats both Gertrude and Ophelia poorly, but what was his shoe size? That's not going to come into it, alright? They're going to ask you questions on character. They're going to ask you questions on relationships. I might give a couple of predictions here as well on this. They might ask you questions on style, and they might ask you questions on theme, alright? Now there's one other type of question that exists, and we would classify that as an open question that might ask about, specific soliloquies that are important in Hamlet, or they might ask in terms of one particular scene, so to speak, and the significance of that scene. If they do ask that, guys are going to look at Act 3, Scene 3, or Act 5, Scene 2. They're the 2 most important scenes within the play. But typically they're going to ask us 2 of these 4 questions, because again, they ask us 2 questions of the paper, and typically, guys, one will come from here, so they'll either ask you a character or relationship question, and then they'll either ask you a style or a theme question. So what I would do is I would prepare accordingly. I got asked another Instagram question earlier on, is it okay to just prepare, to leave themes out of it? Or sorry, the question was actually, is it okay just to focus on relationships and themes? And no is the short answer. You have to look at a third element in there, but you can certainly get rid of one of those 4 types of questions, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Going back to the quote question, 30 malleable quotes. The point I was making, make sure that they're malleable in the sense that they answer 2, if not 3 of those questions, alright? So, don't just take on to be or not to be, for example, and you're like, okay, that's very, very important for the character of Hamlet and nothing else. But then if we open it up to be or not to be, that's important for the character of Hamlet. It's very important for the theme of morality, life and death, for example. It's very much stylistic because it's a soliloquy, etc., etc. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit.
No.
That's the point.
I think the lady does protest too much.
Yeah,
is that from that?
That is from that, but it's actually, we misquoted as well. It's not actually, it's the lady doth protest too much, methinks. but obviously the way we say it, it sounds a little bit better. We think the lady doth protest.
So that could be that could be character of the lady. I get it. So just ask you a couple more questions, Gavin. Then I know you gotta head off on your run.
Yeah, no worries.
So we'll have it's very very funny. So many of the questions about English are in some of the worst English.
Yeah, I noticed that there. So, yeah.
What gonna do for this? No, well, you gotta go. Do we doing that? Done reading.
Yeah. Can I just chime in just before you ask a question? I just saw one of the most recent questions that came in there was, what is the most important thing to master for both papers? And if I could give a kind of generic, kind of overarching statement, it would be timing, your time management. Make sure that you stick to the timing like a surgeon. You know, if you're going 2-3 minutes over a particular topic, you got to stop and you got to move on to the next section. So many marks are needlessly lost by spending an inordinate amount of time on an area that isn't warranted. Sorry, just that was the last live question I saw there.
I suppose the last one before I'm not going to ask you. We'll have another one of these. So for someone asked there, please save this. Yeah, no, don't worry. We've got the school sorting this stuff out. So we'll have all this. This will all be available to you. And then before I ask you something actually outside of a little bit of English, someone asked there, how do you jump from a H2 to a H1?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. It's definitely certainly easier to go, say, from the most common grades in the country, or H4 and a H5, and it's like certainly the tips and tricks are very. Well, I suppose here it's a lot easier to go from the H4 to the H5 and to break through that glass ceiling, and certainly to get into the H2 and H3. That H1 is very much about structure, sticking to your structure, having that bank of vocab that is new and exciting. There's loads more I could tell you about hooks, about starting your introduction in a particular way. There's different little tips and tricks. It's definitely something we'll talk about at Easter in terms of the revision courses, and then on into the grinds and to finish it up. But there's structure will be the overarching thing, making sure that you recognise, even in something, and I won't go into it fully, but even you recognise something that on the surface of things people think is quite subjectively marked, which is the narrative and the short story, that actually if you go about that in a far more formulaic way, give it the correct structure, you can actually gain huge amount of marks by ticking that box. So that would be one thing. Maths, formula.
This is something I'm thinking about here. We talk about a separator and stuff like that. English, with the orals and stuff gone, the things gone, it's really all about exams now. And the fact that English still 100 points, or the other ones, to separate yourself for the big one.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a great statement.
With that in mind, the genuine question for some people there, a couple of people, they were asking about the Easter course, because obviously we'll give you as much content as we can, but there's nothing like, I just think, from my point of view, when I learn anything, immersion. Like how do you learn a language? How do you learn a language? You go to France, you go to Spain. Like how do you study for biology? Like I said on my study plan, if you don't know how to study for the schedule, go to my Instagram page. There's 3 videos I've done there that take you from a blank sheet of paper to what you should do for your entire Leaving Cert, why, backed by every single bit of science that I can have, and if I can help you any more on that, put it into that. But you run through that principle. It's all about immersion. So in that, I simply say you shouldn't be aiming to study 7 subjects a day. Jumping from one to another doesn't help your brain. So what I've always said about the courses here, when you can get in and absolutely plough away at stuff for a week, over the number of days going through it, you just consistently keep building on stuff. You don't forget it. You're like, I remember yesterday's stuff. How have you broken down your Easter courses? What do they offer? It's
a very good question. So the Easter courses have been broken down into paper 1 and paper 2. So I'm going through both papers. So it's one course, paper 1.
It's with you, isn't it?
It is with me. Yeah, I don't know whether that's a positive or negative for people watching.
It's an absolute positive.
Okay, thanks a lot. Cheers, man. But it is, so it's with me. So paper 1, we cover 50% of your grade. We go through the overview of the text. We break down the 12.5% of the question A. I talk about the predictions in terms of question A. Predictions, what we expect to see. Not only the text, we expect to see particular text there as well. Full 75 minutes on question B, and then 2 full 75-minute classes on how to write the essay. 25% of our grade. We have 2 75-minute classes chalked up on that. That's paper 1. And paper 2, the other 50%, and this is actually one of the reasons, or one of the ways that the video sessions become more beneficial and much a greater positive than actually face-to-face time. Because in the past, we would have got 1 poet done over the course of the 5 days. Anybody who signs up to the Easter course gets 5 poets, so gets those 5 poets that we spoke about in order to tick that box, that 12.5%. Full class.
You can get into them from scratch.
So literally the way I've gone through the poets is you start at the very base, you dissect all the poems. I hopefully include a little bit of extra information that you might not have been told before, a little bit of context. I've read kind of extensively about a number of those poets, and I've tried to amalgamate that information into them as well. So it's a very good question. You started very much at the bottom, overview, biography, critical reception, 6 poems, and then past paper questions. We dissect them and we talk about, there's some sample answers in there as well. But in terms of session 1, full class on Hamlet, the structure, the Shakespearean structure, it's actually college level, 3rd level education structure and breakdown of Hamlet. 2 classes on the comparative for anybody who signed up at Christmas. You got 1 class at the comparative, so we've really gone through the comparative in a huge amount more detail. And then, as we said, we have those 2 classes on the poetry as well, plus all that extra poetry information, those extra poetry videos as well. So that's the other 50%. So that's what we're doing at Easter, and it's all ready to go. Literally 10 minutes before we started here, finished in the bag.
Just edited.
Just edited now, and it'll be ready to go, I'd say, by the end of the day.
Do you know what I think is really, really interesting about the way it's kind of like a workshop versus a lecture?
Yeah.
Because I know, like, say for example, I did like this yoga workshop for like a month, and if you run through it, you can't help but improve. Can't fail to improve. But I was just there once, and I see it for a month, and then I finished it. But I could tell I was different. But with learning, even with so I've been to a few conferences. You're there, you get so much out of it, it starts to fade. The fact on this that you can run through the workshop, bring yourself up a grade, go through again, notice a higher order thing again. I actually found that extremely exciting, developing my biology course in that manner. But I think it sounds fantastic.
It's definitely a bonus as well with the video and the kind of virtual classroom interaction. I will constantly I'll say it probably about 10, 12 times within the space of one video. Now it's a chance to pause, dissect a little bit of information yourself, utilise the little 1 or 2 liners that I've just said, try and implement them, we go again. So hopefully students find them super helpful. I think they will now, to be honest. I've had a lot of fun filming them, and I think they're really, really useful. I cannot get over the amount of material that has gone into a 75-minute video versus a 75-minute class. It's arguably like 2 classes in one. Genuinely, I genuinely believe that.
Yeah. Sweet. So we'll almost definitely. As long as everything's KK, we'd love to chat to you again about it.
100%. Whatever we can do to help.
Just in terms of the school stuff there, we are going to be talking with a few more teachers, so hit me up at King Louis TG for what teachers you'd like to see. We do have stuff on languages next week, how you can bounce back from the orals. Obviously I'm doing a class every single day on my page there, so feel free to have a look at that. And if you've got any questions, feel free to hit up the school, hit up myself about any subject, absolutely anything. We'll get it done for you. And so all G,
sweet man.
What's the plan for the rest of the day?
Thanks so much. Take it easy, hit the park, go for a walk.
Unbelievable. Thanks so much, mate.
Thanks, man. Elbow bump, boom.
Unreal.